Last week we read up to line 58 on page 261, and I'm going to continue reading from there. Far are those realms of illumined certitude. Far are those realms from our labor and yearning and call. Perfection's reign and hallowed sanctuary, closed to the uncertain thoughts of human mind, remote from the turbid tread of mortal life. But since our secret selves are next of kin, a breath of unattained divinity visits the imperfect earth on which we toil. Across a gleaming ether's golden laugh, a light falls on our vexed, unsatisfied lives. A thought comes down from the ideal worlds and moves us to new model, even here, some image of their greatness and appeal, and wonder beyond the ken of mortal hope. Amid the heavy sameness of the days and contradicted by the human law, a faith in things that are not and must be lives, comrade of this world's delight and pain. The child of the secret soul's forbidden desire, born of its amour with eternity. Our spirits break free from their environment. The future brings its face of miracle near. Its Godhead looks at us with present eyes. Acts deemed impossible grow natural. We feel the hero's immortality, the courage and the strength death cannot touch, awake in limbs that are mortal, hearts that fail. We move by the rapid impulse of a will that scorns the tardy trudge of mortal time. These promptings come not from an alien sphere. Ourselves are citizens of that mother state. Adventurers, we have colonized matter's night. But now our rights are barred, our passports void. We live self-exiled from our heavenlier home. An errant ray from the immortal mind accepted the earth's blindness and became our human thought, servant of ignorance. An exile, laborer on this unsure globe, captured and driven in life's nescient grasp, hampered by obscure cell and treacherous nerve. It dreams of happier states and nobler powers, the natural privilege of unfallen gods, recalling still its old, lost sovereignty. Amidst earth's mist and fog and mud and stone, it still remembers its exalted sphere and the high city of its splendid birth. A memory steals from a lost heaven of truth. A wide release comes near, a glory calls. A might looks out, an estranged felicity. In glamorous passages of half-veiled light, wandering a brilliant shadow of itself, this quick, uncertain leader of blind gods, this tender of small lamps, this minister serf hired by a mind and body for earth use, forgets its work mid crude realities. It recovers its renounced imperial right. It wears once more its purple robe of thought and knows itself the ideal's seer and king. Communicant and prophet of the unborn, heir to delight and immortality. All things are real, that here are only dreams. In our unknown depths sleeps their reserve of truth. On our unreached heights they reign, and come to us in thought and muse, trailing their robes of light. But our dwarf will and cold pragmatic sense admit not the celestial visitants. Awaiting us on the ideal's peaks, or guarded in our secret self unseen, yet flashed sometimes across the awakened soul, hide from our lives their greatness, beauty, power. Our present feels sometimes their regal touch. Our future strives towards their luminous thrones. Out of spiritual secrecy they gaze. Immortal footfalls in mind's corridors sound. Our souls can climb into the shining plains. The breadths from which they came can be our home. His privilege regained of shadowless sight. The thinker entered the immortal's air and drank again his pure and mighty source. Immutable in rhythmic calm and joy, he saw, sovereignly free in limitless light, the unfallen plains, the thought-created worlds, where knowledge is the leader of the act, and matter is of thinking substance made. Feeling, a heaven bird poised on dreaming wings, answers truth's call as to a parent's voice. Form, luminous, leaps from the all-shaping beam, and will is a conscious chariot of the gods, and life a splendor stream of musing force carries the voices of the mystic suns. A happiness it brings of whispered truth. There runs in its flow, honeying the bosom of space, a laughter from the immortal heart of bliss, and the unfathomed joy of timelessness. The sound of wisdom's murmur in the unknown, and the breath of an unseen infinity. In gleaming clarities of amethyst air, the chainless and omnipotent spirit of mind brooded on the blue lotus of the idea. A gold supernal sun of timeless truth poured down the mystery of the eternal ray through a silence quivering with the word of light on an endless ocean of discovery. Far off he saw the joining hemispheres. On meditation's mounting edge of trance, great stairs of thought climbed up to unborn heights, where time's last ridges touch eternity's skies, and nature speaks to the spirit's absolute. This is an introduction to King Asvapati's explorations of the world, the realm of greater mind. And for Asvapati, for King Asvapati, as he enters this world, it is like a kind of homecoming. When Sri Aurobindo first introduces us to King Asvapati at the very beginning of Canto 3 of Book 1, he's telling us, he says that, how has Savitri come to be born? A world's desire has compelled her mortal birth, and one special being has come to the earth in order to bring about the fulfillment of this desire of the earth. And the poet describes King Asvapati at that point. He calls him a thinker and toiler in the ideal's air. He's talking about this realm of the greater mind. This Mother, in her comments on that passage at the beginning of Canto 3, she says this is a description of a being who has come from a much higher realm than the heavens of our earth. So now we see, after all these other cantos, these so many cantos, we see King Asvapati entering again, the thinker entering the immortal's air and drinking again his pure and mighty source. This is a great homecoming for him. So I'll go back to line 59 and try to give some explanations of these lines in between. So those realms which are being described, the poet says they are very far away from our labor, especially our laboring minds, and our yearning, our longing for these great blissful realms. Far from our labor and yearning and call. What is experienced there is perfection's reign, the rule of perfection, and the hallowed sanctuary of perfection. Something that is hallowed is sacred, and a sanctuary is a sacred, protected place. Those worlds are like that. They are closed to the uncertain thoughts of human mind. They're remote, very far away from the turbid tread of mortal life. Turbid means troubled. Our life is troubled, disturbed. They are very far from us. But, the poet tells us, since our secret selves, our deep innermost selves, are next of kin, we are closely related to those worlds. Some breath from there can come to us. A breath of unattained divinity, from a divine state that we haven't reached yet, visits this imperfect earth on which we toil. It's the third time that he's mentioned toil, the difficulty and struggle of human life. Those realms are far above all that. But from there, since we are closely related to the beings of that realm and that realm itself, across a gleaming ether's golden laugh, the wonderful heavenly atmosphere of golden truth, from there a light falls on our lives which are vexed, troubled, and unsatisfied. Vexed means disturbed, troubled. And a thought comes down from those ideal worlds. when such a thought comes down to us, it may move us to new model, even here, some image of their greatness and appeal, and wonder beyond the ken of mortal hope. Influences come to us from that realm, and that may inspire us to try and recreate here in our world some image of the greatness and appeal, the call of those realms. To try and recreate their wonder, which is beyond the ken, beyond the reach of our mortal hopes. Amid the heavy sameness of our human days, contradicted by the human law, they move us to a faith in things that are not, which don't exist at the moment, but which must be. We feel they must be, or they should be, and the poet tells us those great things must be made true. That faith in things that are not and must be lives as a comrade, a close friend of this world's, our world's delight and pain. That faith, he says, is like an illegitimate child, a child born out of wedlock, the child of the secret soul's forbidden desire, born of its amour, its love affair with eternity. When we get touched by that faith, our spirits break free from their environment, their limited human environment. The future brings its face of miracle near. We begin to believe in a wonderful future. And the Godhead, the divinity of the future, looks at us with present eyes. Things that we thought were impossible, deemed means supposed or thought to be impossible, they grow natural. We feel in us the hero's immortality and the courage and the strength that death cannot touch wakes up in our human limbs, our limbs that are mortal, subject to ignorance and death, and our hearts that tend to despair and fail, grow weak. Moved by those influences, we move by the rapid impulse of a will that scorns the tardy trudge of mortal time. When you scorn something, you don't want to pay any attention to it. It's just nonsense. No? Tardy trudge. Trudge is walking with difficulty. And tardy here means slow, far too slow. So there's this will which despises this slow movement of mortal time. Instead, we may, by that faith, we may get moved by a much more rapid impulse to much greater things. So these promptings, these influences and suggestions are not coming, he says, the poet says, they are not coming to us from an alien sphere, from somewhere that has nothing to do with us, that belongs to another universe. He says, we ourselves are citizens of that mother state from which these impulses are coming. It's not only that we're closely related to the beings there, we ourselves are citizens of that realm. So what has happened? Why are we here? We've come as adventurous explorers. Adventurers. We have colonized matter's night, the darkness, the unconsciousness of the material world. That's one of the ways that Sri Aurobindo describes Asvapati in that first introductory passage. He calls him a colonist from immortality. So we have come also as colonists. We've accepted to be born into this difficult world of matter. But now our rights are barred. We've come here. Now our passports are no longer valid. We have to live here self-exiled from our heavenlier home. And then he tells us that an errant ray, a wandering ray of light from the immortal mind, mind with a capital M, has accepted Earth's blindness. It's as if also descended as a colonist and become our human thought, servant of ignorance. An exile, laborer on this unsure globe. It's got captured and now it's being driven as a slave in the nescient grasp of life, material life. Nescient grasp, this ignorant, unknowing, unconscious grip. It's hampered, it's held back, obstructed by the cells of our bodies, our obscure cells, the nerves which betray us, they're treacherous. But that errant ray from immortal mind is still dreaming of happier states and nobler powers. It's remembering those states from which it has come. It dreams of those happier states and nobler powers that are the natural privilege of unfallen gods, gods who have not descended into the material world. That mind remembers still its old lost sovereignty, even here in the middle of Earth's mist and fog and mud and stone. It still remembers its exalted sphere, that high realm that it has come from, and the high city of its splendid birth. Because of that connection, a memory steals into us from a lost heaven of truth. That memory also has something to do with the faith. A wide release comes near, a sense of freedom. There's a call to a more glorious state. A might looks out, a strength, an estranged felicity, a deep happiness that we've lost track of. So, in glamorous passages of half-veiled light, wandering, a brilliant shadow of itself, this quick, uncertain leader of blind gods, this tender of small lamps, this minister serf, hired by a mind and body for earth use, forgets its work mid crude realities. It's been made, this mind has descended into our material world, and it's been captured and is driven as a kind of slave. This is a description of that mind, a mind that we know actually. It says it is quick but uncertain, and it leads blind gods, other human powers. All of us are ignorant. This mind looks after small lamps, a tender of small lamps. Maybe these little deeps, it has to keep them alight. This mind is a minister serf. A serf is a kind of slave, but still this mind is a kind of advisor to our human state. It's been hired by a mind and body for earth use. But when the memory steals in, it forgets its work in the midst of the crude realities of our material world. In its consciousness, it recovers, it gets back that imperial right which it had renounced in order to come here. Then it remembers, it knows that it is the seer and king of the ideal, the communicant, one who can communicate with the divine, is in constant communion with the divine, prophet of the unborn, heir to delight and immortality. It remembers its true nature. And then the poet reassures us that these are not just dreams. All things are real, that here are only dreams. In our unknown depths sleeps their reserve of truth, the truth that guarantees them. Those things, those real things, are reigning, ruling on the heights we haven't yet reached. And they come to us sometimes in thought and muse, trailing their robes of light. But our human dwarf will, it's so small and weak, and our cold, pragmatic sense, our senses which are not sensitive to those great subtle sensations, they are just practical. They don't accept, they admit not those heavenly visitors who come to us. Still, they are waiting for us on the peaks of the ideal, or they are guarded in our own secret self unseen, and sometimes flashed across our awakened soul. They are hiding from our lives their greatness, beauty, power. Our present feels sometimes their regal touch, their royal, imperial touch, and our future strives towards their luminous thrones. They gaze at us out of their spiritual secrecy, and we hear their footfalls in the corridors of mind. Our souls can climb into the shining plains. The breadths, the vast open spaces from which they came can be our home. So these next lines are about King Asvapati personally. His privilege regained of shadowless sight. The thinker entered the immortal's air and drank again his pure and mighty source. This is why I said it's like a kind of homecoming. He regains his original privilege of shadowless sight, sight without any darkness, unveiled. The thinker, Asvapati, the thinker and toiler who has come from the immortal's air, he re-enters it and drinks again his pure and mighty source, his origin. It's like a wonderful outflowing of pure energy. And he sees these unfallen planes, the planes that have not descended. He sees them immutable, unchangeable in their rhythmic calm and joy. They are sovereignly free in limitless light, the unfallen planes. The thought-created worlds, where knowledge is the leader of the act, and matter is of thinking substance made in those realms. Feeling, a heaven bird poised on dreaming wings, answers truth's call as to a parent's voice. Form, luminous, leaps from the all-shaping beam, a beam of light, and will is a conscious chariot of the gods, a vehicle to carry divine beings. And life, the power of life, is a splendor stream of musing force. It carries the voices of the mystic suns, all the great lights of truth. A happiness it brings of whispered truth. There runs in its flow, honeying the bosom of space, making everything full of sweetness, a laughter from the immortal heart of bliss, and the unfathomed joy of timelessness. The sound of wisdom's murmur in the unknown, and the breath of an unseen infinity. In that high realm, in gleaming clarities of amethyst air, the chainless and omnipotent spirit of mind brooded on the blue lotus of the idea, the creative thought. Clarities, absolutely clear and pure. This amethyst air. Amethyst is such a beautiful color, a kind of mixture of turquoise and purple. This is now the chainless, unchained, absolutely free, all-powerful spirit of mind is concentrating on the blue lotus of the idea. Here on earth, the blue lotus doesn't exist. There are pink lotuses and yellow lotuses and white lotuses. And there are blue water lilies. But the blue lotus is said to grow on the other side of Mount Kailash, beyond Lake Manasarova, and this can only be seen by very special people. A gold, supernal sun, a supreme sun of timeless truth, that truth that is mentioned in the Gayatri Mantra. Poured down the mystery of the eternal ray through a silence quivering with the word of light on an endless ocean of discovery. Far off, he saw, Aswapati saw, the joining hemispheres, the upper and the lower hemispheres. On meditation's mounting edge of trance, great stairs of thought climbed up to unborn heights, where time's last ridges touch eternity's skies, and nature speaks to the spirit's absolute. This is our introduction to the kingdom of the and Godheads of the greater mind. And today, exceptionally, we can listen to Mother's reading of a few of these lines and see the paintings which she helped Huta to make, and listen to Sunilda's composition for two of these passages.
तपसा कर्मणा वा ज्ञानप्रसादेन विशुद्धसत्त्वास्ततस्तु तं पश्यति निष्कलं ध्यायमानः एषोऽनुरात्मा चेतसा वेदितव्यो यस्मिन् प्राणः पञ्चधा सङ्गिविवेश प्राणैश्चित्तं सर्वमूतं प्रजानां यस्मिन् विशुद्धे विभवत्येषयात्मा यम यमलोकं मनसा संविभाति विशुद्धसत्त्वः कामयते याङ्श्च कामान् तं तं लोकं जयते काङ्श्च कामान् तस्मात् आत्मज्ञं यर्चयेत् भूतिकामः.
His privilege regained a shadowless sight. The thinker entered the immortal's air and drank again his pure and mighty source.
चक्षुषा गूह्यते नापि वाचा नान्यैर्देवैस्तपसा कर्मणा वा ज्ञानप्रसादेन विशुद्धसत्त्वास्ततस्तु तं पश्यति निष्कलं ध्यायमानः. एषोऽनुरात्मा चेतसा वेदितव्यो यस्मिन् प्राणः पञ्चधा संविवेश प्राणैश्चित्तं सर्वमूतं प्रजानां यस्मिन् विशुद्धे विभवत्येषयात्मा यम यमलोकं मनसा संविभाति विशुद्धसत्त्वः कामयते याङ्श्च कामान् तं तं लोकं जयते काङ्श्च कामान् तस्मात् आत्मज्ञं यर्चयेत् भूतिकामः.
clarities of amethyst air, the chainless and omnipotent spirit of mind brooded on the blue lotus of the idea.
A question about the thought-created worlds. The lines come at the bottom of page 263. There's a passage of a few lines after speaking about King Asvapati's homecoming, entering again the immortal's air, and drinking again his pure and mighty source. Immediately after that, at the bottom of page 263, and going on to the next page, we have these lines. Immutable in rhythmic calm and joy, he saw, sovereignly free in limitless light, the unfallen plains, the thought-created worlds, where knowledge is the leader of the act and matter is of thinking substance made. Feeling, a heaven bird poised on dreaming wings, answers truth's call as to a parent's voice. Form, luminous, leaps from the all-shaping beam, and will is a conscious chariot of the gods. And life, a splendor stream of musing force, carries the voices of the mystic suns. So I was asked to explain this passage, and particularly the phrase about the thought-created worlds. I was baffled. I didn't know how to answer this question. So I turned to Dr. Alok Pandey and asked him to help us. And he's given a very beautiful, illuminating answer, which I'll share with you all now. He says, these lines, appearing in Canto 11 of Book 2 of Savitri, the kingdoms and godheads of the greater mind, describe the worlds climbing from the limits of human mind, the triple layers of physical, vital, and thinking mind, to the overmind regions. It is the world proper to thought, which is free to act there without any hindrance. In those worlds, it is thought that is the creator, the formateur, or form maker, as the Mother has called it. The Godheads of these worlds are stationed in spaces of rhythmic calm and joy. This phrase, rhythmic calm and joy, reveals this realm to be the birthplace of mantras, which have come down to rishis who have ascended to the top of these higher planes of consciousness. Here, the light is set free and not cabined in narrow forms of words with fixed meanings. Here are realms of seeing thought, where revelation, illumination, and intuition are the ways to knowledge. Although absolute sight is lacking, yet ignorance is not there. The Godheads are conscious of a greater light beyond, from which they have emerged. They have not yet fallen into the realms of little mind, where ignorance abounds. There, knowledge of oneness and truth and the true law of things is the leader. Unlike here in our world, where ignorance leads us towards knowledge, or in the vital worlds, where force leads, or the realm of subtle matter, where beauty of form is predominant. There, in those higher realms of mind, knowledge is the leader, subordinating force and form to its sovereign light. Each of the worlds has a characteristic power that builds the forms and drives the beings of that world. In the vital world, it is force that builds the forms, which in turn respond readily to vital forces. In the higher realms of the greater mind, rhythmic thought vibrations build the worlds. That is why we see that these mantras are also regarded as deities. Even the meters are regarded as living goddesses or living energies, since mantra has built these worlds. In the ancient story of Rishi Vishvamitra, we see him building a heavenly world for Trishankhu, the ancestor of Rama, to live in permanently. The substance of these higher worlds responds readily to the pressure of thought, the rhythmic, luminous thought which is found in these regions. Here in our world, matter is a substance that responds with some difficulty and adjustment to thought, or even to vital force and spiritual energies. There, it is a substance that vibrates with those energies. In other words, the substance of those worlds is luminous and vibrating with rhythmic calm and joy. That substance is what all the beings traditionally described as gods are made up of in those worlds, to different degrees, of course. This is the import of these wonderful lines, which set the tone for the much more that is yet to come.